The situation in Ukraine can be described in one word: explosive. There is a mix of contradictory signals that are coming out. One set of signals that are coming out from the battlefield in Ukraine per se, and the second set of signals that have now originated from the NATO 75th Anniversary Conference in Washington. Now, the simple fact is that Ukraine is at the end of its tether. It has suffered about 500,000 casualties in terms of dead and wounded. Satellite photographs of the new cemeteries that have come up in Ukraine are a very clear indication of the kind of casualties they have suffered, enormous casualties they have suffered, and which of course they are trying to hide. Fictive reality is being created which is very far from the objective facts on the ground. Ukraine is desperately short of manpower. Ukraine is short of ammunition. Ukraine is short of artillery. Yes, they have been given a whole lot of drones. A drone factory has been set up in Ukraine itself, and with the help of this, Ukraine is hitting back with small tactical strikes and making movement difficult on the battlefield. But the writing is on the wall. Slowly but relentlessly, the Russians are advancing. They first attacked in the month of June in the Kharkiv sector, and they made quick and surprising gains. Their 72 motorized rifle division, which was part of a corps which had been concentrated to in the area of Belgorod, etc., in these regions north of Kharkiv. They had launched this attack. There was surprisingly no minefields. They encountered no minefields in the first line of defense, no defense lines, etc., which are supposed to have been done. If it is corruption, I think it almost amounts to treachery. They made very quick and swift gains. They captured about 12 villages and have come about 3 to 4 kilometers inside and are steadily advancing. The Ukrainian higher command panicked, and from the south and from the east they withdrew 5 brigades, and they have launched them in very massive counterattacks to try and push the Russians back. The Russians have taken a very heavy toll of these counter-attacking forces. There are 3 of them are the Marine Brigade, which have come from Kherson, and 2 other mechanized brigades. They have taken a very heavy toll as they have been advancing, and very fierce urban combat is currently on in 2 major sectors in the Kharkiv area. The Russians have stalled the counter-offensives and they are making steady gains. While this was on, and the Russian Maskarovka deception offensive in the north had managed to suck up the Ukrainian reinforcements to the north. That is the time the Russians commenced their attacks in the east. Now they have steadily been fighting in the east. The Russians are somehow avoiding any major push like the ones that we had seen the Ukrainians do last year. Massive armored attacks that that are subjected to heavy artillery attrition and heavy damage by drones, and the Russians had almost destroyed both the Ukrainian corps in which had launched the famous counter-offensive last year. So the Russians have also learned their lesson that with firepower, and especially with the large-scale availability of drones, the battlefield has become so very lethal that attacks are almost becoming impossible. But the Russians have sort of given a great deal of thought to this problem, They have improvised and they have come up with some very, very innovative solutions. What they are doing is they are now making large scale and massive use of their FAB glide bombs that have strap-on guidance kits of satellite guidance based on their GLONASS set of satellites, navigation satellites. Now these are dumb gravity bombs of very heavy tonnage, in the sense they are 500 kg bombs, 1000 kg bomb, 1500 and 3000 kilogram bombs. Dumb bombs which have been given strap on wings which enable them to glide a distance of about 40 kilometers. They are launched from standoff distances of 40 kilometers, and these are proving to be a game changer. As it is, the Russians have a 5:1 superiority in artillery, throw weight and firepower. They use massive artillery firepower, but now with these FAB glide toss bombs, this has made a kind of a mini revolution in military affairs, on the battlefield. The Russians also have their drones. The Ukrainians are using them in a very major fashion. The new environment in the Ukrainian battlefield, which is dominated by FAB drones, which are causing exponential amount of casualties and losses. So, like I said, their technique now is to use, the FAB bombs, very heavy tonnage bombs, to blast the target areas, use massive artillery. They have 5:1 superiority in artillery, and with the help of this suppressive, it's not suppressive fire, it is destructive shoots. It is not neutralization which is temporary. They aim for lasting neutralization, very heavy weight of artillery, very heavy firepower, and now backed up by, they have used almost 3000 FAB bombs for the capture of Avdiivka. So now the Russians, initially it is the Donetsk, the locally recruited troops from Donetsk area which were doing the fighting. Now the Russians have quietly brought in the 98 and the 106 airborne divisions, which are their crack outfits. They are very elite outfits, the airborne forces. Now the 98 airborne division has been operating in Charsiv Yar. They have captured Charsiv Yar. It took them 3 months. Incremental creeping advances, slow but steady but relentless. And similarly, in the Avdiivka area, the 106 airborne division has made some very good progress. Slow, incremental, steady but relentless. They are using the firepower to stun the defenders, leave them with a glazed comatose look in the eyes. So heavy is the weightage of fire, devastate entire buildings, get them down, and then they use small infantry squads. They are not using major tank assault, huge pushes. It's not the World War II blitzkrieg style operations anymore, which have become passé, with a heavy tilt in the battlefield towards the defense. Defense has become so strong that any major offensives will cause heavy casualty. Russia and Putin have been very, very careful to conserve the lives of their troops. Therefore, they are using heavy power to stun the defenders, and then they use small squads. Not even in BMPs and armored personnel carriers or infantry combat vehicles, but mostly they started using FAVs, or these so-called dune buggies that were first seen in the Iran-Iraq war. Very high mobility, very low silhouette vehicles, and they have started using motorcycles, very innovative, to sort of make quick dashes and advances on the battlefield. And with these superior tactics, what they have done is they dug out the old maps of this area where there were tunnels for mining. So the GRU, the Russian military intelligence, they dug out these old maps and they have located these tunnels. They have used the tunnels to get behind the enemy lines and totally surprised the Ukrainians and made some very deep advances, 3 to 4 kilometers, in a day using these tunnels. So therefore, the two bulges, they are more or less flattening out. They are now almost completed the capture of Kramatorsk, which is the capital of the Donetsk region of Ukraine. So this is the ground situation as far as the war theatre is concerned. Ukraine is under serious pressure. They had initially their international legion and the Kraken regiment operating in this Charsiv Yar area, which had put up a damn good fight, and they have become experts in using FAB drones to cause heavy casualties onto attacking vehicles and even attacking infantry. Then they were replaced because they had been fighting non-stop for a long time. They needed a break, they needed to be turned over, and Ukraine has now sent in the new conscripts, which have cracked up, and most of the Russian breakthroughs have come recently when these newly inducted, barely trained troops are just being pulled off the streets, recruited, given a rifle, given a few days training, and shoved into action. Ukraine is at the end, scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as manpower is concerned. And it is now increasingly becoming apparent to the United States, to NATO, that just giving weapons will not save Ukraine. Will not save Ukraine. They'll have to put boots on the ground. Now you put boots on the ground, and that means a direct clash between NATO and Russia. What was so far a proxy war then becomes an outright war between Russia and the NATO forces, right? And the moment that happens, we could be hours away from the Third World War. We could be hours away from crossing of the tactical nuclear threshold. I mean, the bets are all off once that kind of a thing happens, because Russia is also at the end of the tether. May I also point out that the ultra right wing in Russia, the ultra nationalists, they are putting a lot of pressure on Putin. They feel he's being too cautious. They feel he's not being bold enough, that he should have launched the major counter-offensive that was promised for the month of June. But he has been very hesitant, very cautious, very concerned about conserving Russian lives, which is a good cause. And however, that just means that this war is dragging on and on. And the kind of opportunity that the Russians had when, because of the American stoppage of weapons and supplies, Ukraine was in a very weak position. Russia could have exploited it fully. Now, slowly the situation is being altered. We had the summit in Washinton, the 75th anniversary of the founding of NATO was done in a very, very major way. A big thing was made out of it, a big show, tamasha in Washington. There were very energetic speeches. Now, Biden has had his faux pas in his debate with Donald Trump, which has cost him a lot of his support. The Democrats are in fact howling that he should step down. But they were trying to show that he is fully in charge, that he can deliver, and therefore Biden did make some very, very, very emotive speeches. Now, this is the dilemma that we are watching. Ukraine is at the end of its tether. Realist generals and advisors of Zelenskyy have advised him to cut his losses and to go for a ceasefire. So far, in Switzerland, when they held the so-called peace conference, Russia was not invited. How one can have peace in a war, in a conflict, without the other side being present, beats my understanding. But that is how it was done. It was more of a propaganda stunt. But now the ground realities, his dire shortages of manpower, ammunition, etc. are beginning to tell, and he has now agreed From the media reports so far, he has now agreed to have a ceasefire. He is open to the idea of a ceasefire with Russia, and he's been come around to the fact that the Russian-speaking areas of Donetsk, Luhansk, etc., Crimea, that Russia has captured, he may have to accept their loss on a permanent basis. He was being brought around to this. Then we found history repeating itself. It's very interesting. In the month of April 2022, in February, the Russians had launched their offensive. By April, they had captured most of almost 80 to 90% of their objective areas, the Russian-speaking areas of Donetsk and Luhansk. Luhansk was almost 90% captured. Donetsk was 60% captured. Very stiff fighting was going on the line of contact. Very heavy fighting, in fact. And then they had secured a land bridge to Crimea. Crimea was already secured in 2014. They had secured most of the sea coast of Azov and the Black Sea, captured all the ports, less Odessa, the only port that remains with Ukraine, the only outlet to the sea. So they had achieved most of their purposes, most of their aims and objectives, and Putin was very keen to have a ceasefire and call it off. Putin has been from the outset very concerned about not getting to a point of no return with his Slav cousins, the Ukrainians. Culturally, they are so similar, they are one people. The Orthodox Church is headquartered actually has its origins in Ukraine, that is the core of some of the Russian Slavic culture, and therefore Putin was very keen that this battle should not alienate the Ukrainian cousins so totally that it would become a gulf forever. A major attempt has been made by the neo-Nazi elements which Reinhard Gehlen, the German military intelligence chief, had recruited to fight the Russians in the Great Patriotic War, in the Second World War. Those people, the Banderas, etc., have been recruited by the CIA now to create a neo-Nazi outfit which is controlling the presidency. I don't think you can call Ukraine a democracy anymore. They have deferred their elections. His term of office is over and Russia is questioning his legitimacy. But the simple fact of the matter is, he is at the end of its tether. In April 2022, peace talks had been held in Belarus. Peace talks had been held in Turkey. And it was agreed, amazingly, that Russia would withdraw progressively from all the territories it had occupied. It was in return asking for total neutrality and no question of Ukraine joining NATO. These kind of assurances, and Putin was prepared to pull back. That is the time the Ukrainians asked him to show his sincerity for this kind of a talk, and he made a goodwill gesture by pulling his troops back from the gates of Kyiv. Now, instead of appreciating this gesture, instead of going for peace and trying to stop the bloodletting, Boris Johnson flew into Kyiv. A series of European leaders flew into Kyiv. American officials flew into Kyiv, and they forced Zelenskyy that he would refuse the ceasefire, that he would continue fighting till they were talking of a Ukrainian victory. They were talking of a defeat of Russia. They thought Russia had it. They were so taken in by their own propaganda, their own information warfare narratives. I'm afraid they had lost touch with ground reality. They tried to paint the Russian army as corrupt, as inefficient, as useless. I'm afraid that is not the reality. The reality is now showing itself. They are very professional and they have very good at innovation. They have adapted, innovated in a way that is remarkable, and in a way that is now has made their victory more or less certain. They are certain of their victory. They are in no hurry. They don't want to waste lives. They are going about it slowly. But history repeats itself. Just like in 2022, the Americans and the British had put major pressure on Zelenskyy not to go in for a ceasefire. The West is very keen to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. Sane voices in Ukraine are telling Zelenskyy that this is suicidal. The conclusion is more or less foregone. How long you want to stretch it out is your own choice. The damage is entirely to Ukraine, to its infrastructure, to its people, to its cities, to its population. 500,000 Ukrainians have been killed, about another million wounded, disabled. The population, half of it has fled to other countries. They are scraping the bottom of the barrel for manpower. So, once again, history has repeated itself. When Zelenskyy was prepared to throw in the towel, prepared to go for a ceasefire, prepared to go for talks, when Orban of Hungary met him, met Putin, has gone to China, he's trying to strike a peace deal, has come to the United States, has met Donald Trump. He's trying to convince him that it is pointless, it is futile getting your people slaughtered for no rhyme or reason, no palpable gain. If he had called it off in 2022, it would have been called off at a very high point as far as Ukraine was concerned. They had fought very well, they had fought very tenaciously, they had defended Kyiv, they had defended Kharkiv, the major cities, and they could have taken a bow at that time. So many thousands of lives would have been saved. But when you are used, you let yourself be used, you let your territory be rented out to extra regional powers who are trying to, the aim was to get Putin down, to get an excuse to poke him in the eye till he started the war, and then impose heavy economic sanctions. And they were hopeful that the Putin regime would collapse, there would be a coup against Putin. Nothing of the sort has happened. Forget the economy collapsing. The Russian economy is growing at 3.2% annual rate of GDP growth. The Russian economy is looking up and up. The entire plan of the West to collapse the Russian economy, I think, has more or less backfired, especially on Europe, which had such strong energy linkages with Russia that without it they have been floundering. Their economies have taken a big hit. The German economy, the French economy, the European economy, that continent is on the verge of collapse. But despite this, we find that there have been very, very energetic rhetoric in the 75th conference of the NATO anniversary of its founding in Washington, where Joe Biden has spewed venom, fire and brimstone against Russia. He's threatened to put Tomahawk cruise missiles in Germany, in other countries of Europe, and by 2026 there are plans that they will give Tomahawk cruise missiles of 1,800 kilometers range to Ukraine so that they can hit even beyond the capital city of Moscow. Now, I don't think this could be the last straw that broke the camel's back. They are going to give F-16s. The Ukrainian pilots have supposedly have done their training, but this is an absolutely radically new and different aircraft from the MiG-29s and Su-27s that they were flying so far. Their body language is not attuned to the Western, the American fighters. The American F-16 are complex fighters to fly. There are press reports to the effect that the pilots will be American. The pilots could be European. They will fly, shotgun, ride shotgun for the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainian pilots do not have that, combat experience and efficiency or technical experience with this aircraft, flying experience with this aircraft, to be able to take on the Russian Su-30s, Su-35s, and their very, very effective S-300, S-400, S-500s, air defense missiles. So the fact of the matter is, if you think that the F-16s will be a silver bullet, we've seen a whole lot of silver bullets been tried incrementally and failed incrementally in Ukraine. We were first told that the Javelin and TOW anti-tank missiles are the silver bullet that will win the war. It didn't. Next we came to the HIMARS will win the war. The Russians are now able to intercept, electronically jam the HIMARS. Then we were told the ATACMS will win the war single-handedly for Ukraine, and the Russians have been able to find electronic countermeasures even for the ATACMS. Most of them are getting intercepted or shut up. Now we have the latest in the series of silver bullets, the F-16. The F-16 is a fourth generation aircraft. They are 4.5 generation aircraft. Russia now has also the Su-57, a fifth generation aircraft. So, I mean, how will the F-16 stand up in relation to these more advanced fighters with better BVR range missiles? Now remains to be seen. The Russians are not taking any chances. All these F-16s require longer runways. All the runways capable of taking the F-16, the Ukrainian air bases have been subjected to repeated heavy attacks with FABs, etc. They've devastated all the planes that were there, and the moment the F-16s come there, they will be devastated. So now there are talk that these F-16s will be based in Moldova, they will be based in Poland. And if they operate from Poland against Russian targets, well, that is NATO at war with Russia. We are heading for very, very dangerous times. The statements coming out of Ukraine were, the statements coming out of the United States were very, very bellicose, even though this was supposed to be a showpiece of how effective and how much in charge Biden was after that disastrous debate. I'm afraid there have been few rather embarrassing stumbles. He called Zelenskyy Putin. He called Kamala Harris Donald Trump. It is now becoming pathetic. It is now becoming pathetic. The Democratic lobby is strongly working to try and make Joe Biden step down from this race. Joe Biden, in turn, has been spewing lava and brimstone against Russia, and is swearing to, escalate the conflict. There is talk, media speculations, and fairly accurate Telegram intelligence channels which are saying that Poland is training its local Ukrainian citizens to form a Ukrainian brigade to intervene. Similar things are being done. France is wanting to put boots on the ground, put for 2,000 members of its 3rd Foreign Legion Brigade, etc. on the ground. How far are these going to be actual threats or just bluff and bluster will remain to be seen. But Poland is concentrating troops on the borders of Belarus. Quite obviously, we are all aware that Russia has deployed tactical ballistic missiles in the region of Belarus, in the territory of Belarus, and any Polish adventures there could lead to tactical nuclear weapons release with unpredictable consequences, with absolutely unpredictable escalatory spirals. And the most amazing factor is that Belarus is now been made the 11th member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. And as we speak, Chinese troops are carrying out an exercise with the Belarusians and Russian troops in Belarus. The Chinese have put boots on the ground. If the NATO can put boots on the ground, the logic goes that so can China put boots on the ground. And China is definitely now helping the Russians in a very significant manner. They may not be transferring weapons, but they are definitely giving them the chips which they need so badly. They are definitely giving them the material, the chemicals for making explosives, cotton explosives, which are used in all the artillery shells, and a whole lot of other, ancillary, defense-related equipment is being supplied. The supply of drones by China to Russia, it has gone up by almost 30 to 40% of what the sales were in 2022, 2023. Huge sale of drones, which are proving extremely effective on the battlefield. So this conflict is now teetering at a very critical edge. The far right wing in Russia is very incensed that Putin is being very cautious. Generally, we have seen that the Russians like to see the other side make the first move before they respond. They like to defensively absorb the enemy's offensive, impose heavy attrition, and then swing to the counter-offensive. This is exactly what they have done in Ukraine. They have realized the power of the defensive. I'm not sure if NATO and American troops are really geared. They have only fought low-intensity conflicts against low-grade, third-rate enemies like the Afghans, like the Libyans, like the Iraqis, like the Syrians, who were no match, absolute overmatch in terms of technological capabilities and even size of the armies that were deployed. They outnumbered heavily the Iraqis by almost 2 to 3 to 1 before they attacked Gulf War 1, etc. So the fact of the matter is, I'm not sure how geared even the 100,000 Americans that are now deployed in Europe, how geared are they to fight with the Russians? The Russians are well, combat hardened now in this new genre of warfare. They've devised the tactics and techniques. They have destroyed the Abrams tanks. They have destroyed the Challengers. They have destroyed the Leopards. And most of the American equipment has come to grief in this new high-intensity battle environment. This is not low-intensity conflict. And I'm very sure even the NATO generals, even the Americans would actually think 10 times before actually getting involved in a military conflict with the United States by putting boots on the ground, and a direct clash will definitely lead to vertical and horizontal escalation. This is the real great worry. Thank you.